The City of Canton's FY 2014 budget. So at this time, we have, is anyone there who wanted to speak that did not sign a sheet in the back? Okay. All right, well we will go ahead and address this. Clay Cowley has asked to speak. If you would come forward, sir.
Good evening. I tried to make it here for the last meeting, but I've been busy with my life and work and school and everything else. I wish I could have gotten this out then. I understand that there have been some conversations on this topic that I just found out a few minutes ago. But I wanted to apologize for feeling like this is the only place to air my concerns with the hiring of the personnel of the fire department. My desire was to be able to explain the benefits to it without taking up the time of the council. I also wanted to apologize for any way that any of my statements or my demeanor or anything comes across, because I know that I come across as being gruff or condescending or anything like that, and I don't mean to. So I wanted to go ahead and apologize for that. And some of my statements during the town hall meeting were, I believe they were misunderstood or misquoted or whatever. But I have a lot of brothers and sisters in the fire department in Cobb County, in Cherokee County, Woodstock, and Canton. And I work with these people every third day, and they trust me with their life, and I trust them with my life. So nothing that I say has anything to do with the people that I work with, merely the circumstances that they have to work under, the amount of equipment or amount of manpower. I feel like what brought all this on was the topic of the ISO stuff, and it's been adamantly mulled over from one angle, and I took it upon myself to, from what I know and what I could find, I went home and actually Googled it. I binged it and looked it up. And out of the first 10 topics that I found when I did it, 7 of them were the opposite of what Mr. Cummins had presented, that ISO has no bearing on insurance. So 70% of the research that I found was contrary to what was said about ISO not impacting insurance prices. The other thing is, my father-in-law owns an insurance business in Buckhead, and he has for over 40 years. And when I told him about the comment that ISO has nothing to do with insurance prices or rates, he laughed and said, call the insurance commissioner and tell him that. The other personal experience that I know about is there's 2 neighborhoods. One's in Cherokee County and one is in the city of Woodstock. Their property actually backs up to one another. People in one neighborhood found out that they weren't getting the ISO rate in the other neighborhood. Then they found out that they were paying a higher price. So the one neighborhood goes around to all the neighbors and discusses it, and they all find out that they're paying a higher rate also. Meanwhile, their property touches the fire station that's an ISO 3 that provides the same service to them as it does the service of the neighborhood next to them. So they couldn't get the answer they wanted, so they called the insurance commission and started this whole big thing, and that's how the ISO inspection came about a few years ago, was that these people were complaining about their insurance prices. So those are my experiences with it, and I wanted to air those, and I would love to have done it some other time than at a council meeting. And I also want to, I don't know how to transition into this, but I want to try to describe to you how scenes work, whether it's a fire or a wreck or whatever. And I understand that some of you already have some knowledge of this that I found out about today. But just a real quick, so you know, if you pull up to, say a fire company pulls up to a wreck with the incident command system and SOPs and such as that, the officer in the truck is in charge of the scene. The engineer in the truck is in charge of running the pump. Then it takes somebody else to run the extrication equipment. Now, if it's a one-person, one-car accident, it may not make a difference. But if there's more than one person in more than one car, well, you've run out of 3 people right there, and you haven't even made patient contact yet. Okay? So now say there's 2 people in there. Well, that's just one person, and that's just one car. And if they collide with another car that has more in there, now you're down a whole other crew to work the other patients in the other car and tend to them the needs that they have. When it comes to a medical emergency, if you have a heart attack or anything like that, somebody goes down, you go in, and the optimum number to have there just to work the person is 4. Have you ever seen an emergency room with 3 people in it or 2 people in it when somebody's coded? If you haven't been in an emergency room, you wouldn't know. But they have a whole team of people that come in there to take care of this person. And the most important time is the first few minutes of being there. So you've got somebody that's trying to provide respirations to this person. You got somebody that's doing compressions, and you got somebody that's trying to deal with the family, and then somebody needs to be given drugs or whatever else needs to be going on. So, I mean, you can see that the numbers really stack up. So now you got an ambulance there, and somebody's got to drive. So now you're looking at 5 people. So my desire is that you understand the importance of numbers. So my last example is going to be, so if it's a fire, if it's a low-rise apartment complex or maybe a senior living home or whatever, and the fire is not on the first floor, and the first fire company shows up, and there's somebody struck, whether it's a child or an adult or anything, a life is a life. And the first thing that we care about as firemen is saving the person. So if the first officer that gets there on the truck is in charge of the scene, the next person that's there is in charge of the truck and providing water, and it takes 2 people to put up a ladder and to save somebody. That's 4 people. Now what if it's an apartment building and more than one person is trapped? You can see the importance of getting people there fast. And that's my whole point, and that's what I wanted to address, not here necessarily. And I know how important it is and how well it works from doing it. That the more people you have at a scene, the better off it is for the patient or the person that you're there for. And out of all of these examples, and I could give you many more scenarios like that, none of which have anything to do with putting water on fire yet. So the choice is not there, or the option is not there trying to put a fire out, because most of the time we know the damage is going to be done when the fire starts. The damage is going to be done. We want to save the life. And if you would vow, and I doubt that you will, that if it ever does happen, that you're going to stand in the yard of somebody, of your family member or mine, and try to console me with saving me $3 a month on my taxes, it's not going to work. I would pay the $3 more to know that my family is that much safer. And next year, I would pay $3 more again to have even more people. And I hope I made my point, and I hope I haven't offended anybody. I really desire to. I live here. My family lives here. Your families live here. I'm not trying to do this for any gain of my own. The citizens of Canton deserve better, every opportunity they can have for protection. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's anyone else there? in attendance tonight would wish to speak? Okay. Mr. Mayor. We, I was just going to close the public input period at this time, and then we will be discussing that on the council.
Well, that would be that, but since my name was mentioned, I'd like to clarify a couple
Okay.
points. If it wasn't specifically mentioned, I would not want to say anything. First of all, I thank Mr. Cawley for his speech to the council. He did misquote me. He said that there would be no savings. Never have I said there would be no savings. My quotation was very specific, that going from an ISO 4 to a 3 would at best create insignificant savings. So that was point number one.
The
that I'd like
savings
to
was not the
correct.
point.
Anyway, you had your chance to let him have his, and we'll go back.
And naturally, when you have multiple car accidents, when the 911 call comes in, it will require a second truck to be dispatched, or even if it's a multiple accident, a third truck might be dispatched from the county or from associated other fire department. So depending upon the severity, we can't look at just one truck being dispatched. It could be two, could be three. Relative to fires and apartment fires, 4.2% of the incidents the first 6 months of this year were fires. In my example, I used the apartment fire of the Canterbury Ridge Apartments. I believe it was May or June of last year. I don't have the exact date in my head. And in that case, there were about 110 personnel, and where we have mutual aid or will eventually have automatic aid, again, you have a significant response that is available and does address those situations. Doesn't all come just from the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
There were some issues early in the year about public input, and that maybe I was trying to squash public input. But one of the things I've noticed throughout this period of time, we've had public input until maybe this last couple of council meetings. We sit here and we listen and digest what is being given as public input, and we do not come back with comments. I was attacked and referenced council meeting, and I sit here and listen to it. Okay, fine. We move on to our own business. I don't think it's appropriate to have somebody get up, public input, and then turn around and then come back and challenge. And I would say, do we change the program? Because I'd be more happy to jump down anybody that got up there and said something I don't like. But we sit here and listen to it as public input. Now, just make a decision here. Are we going to start playing that game, or we're going to stay what we have done in these past council meetings? Listen to the public input, make your notes, and then digest it. Do not come back and challenge somebody with public input.
Thank you, Mr. Beresford. Okay.
And one last point. The protocol that Mr. Beresford passed restricted public from making accusatory remarks against any individual council member. And that's the reason I came back.
Okay.
They're supposed to make them as
Mr.
general
Beresford,
comments.
you have something? Oh, okay. Well, let's move on here. I will entertain a motion that we adjourn the public input portion of this meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion. Okay. Now we will call to order our special call meeting, August 22nd, 2013. And if you will, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we bow. Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for all that are here, and we ask that we consider all matters that are before us and that we make the right decision. All these things we pray in your name.
Okay, I guess we got much choice, but I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda. It's on the agenda. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. All members voted for the motion. Okay. We don't have any at the public input period at this signed up for this section, so I will open this up for discussion with the council.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Cummins, I believe, raised his hand here. That's okay. And I'll be right to you.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the budget presented with the following changes. Removal of all new fireman hires, 3% 3% general increase for non-exempt personnel only. Withhold the police equalization increases until comparable pay studies for all personnel have been completed and submitted to council, and utilization of an approximately $100,000 from unassigned balance in order to balance the budget and hold the millage rate at 6.8 mils. That's my motion.
Do we have a second? Anybody need that repeated?
I want to hear, how much was it?
100,000 from unassigned balance in order to...
Okay, thank you. No second.
You second? You say you second? Okay, a motion and a second. Okay, now we'll open it up for discussion. Mr. Cummings?
The only change from what I suggested at the last meeting was the police equalization. I've given it a lot of thought that if we, they would get the 3% general increase, but if we selectively look at comparable rates of one department without looking at the comparable rates of other departments, I think it will create a morale problem within other departments, because they will say, well, we're not paid or compensated comparably. So my mind would be that if and when we have instruct Mr. Wood to expand that to all departments, and if we find that in other areas we are also not comparable, that we would at one time make a budget amendment utilizing from the unassigned balance any increases that would be required to make all employees comparable. And that was the reason that I've added that until, or if and until when we have a comparable pay scale for all employees.
And that could be done during FY 2014.
That could be done.
In addition to the 3%.
In addition to it, it would be a review of all employees to see that we're comparable, not just a selection of a single department. I think that sends a message to other departments, fire department being one, that we haven't looked at them. Public Works, another department. I just don't feel comfortable singling out one department. I think we need to look at all of our employees and make sure that we're paying comparable wages, but it should be done at one time, in my opinion.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other discussion? Well, we'll take a roll call vote. Let's see, Mr. Bryan?
No.
Okay, Mr. Goodman?
No.
Beresford?
No.
Mr. Cummins?
Yes?
Mr. Rush?
No.
And Mr. Hutton?
No.
Okay. Okay. I'll entertain Mr. Bryan.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make some comments about...
Motion failed, by the way, 5-1.
I'm sorry.
sorry to, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I don't think I said that motion failed.
I'd like to make my motion and then follow up with some explanation if it gets a second. And that is to adopt the budget that has been proposed with only two changes. Number one, remove budgetary allocation for any new firefighters for this year. Two, increase the use of fund balance from $820,000 to $1,120,000. Total revenues and expenditures in the general fund will remain balanced at $11,440,700. This action will enable the city to leave the millage rate at 6.8 mils and maintain approximately $1 million in unassigned fund balance, aka surplus.
Second motion.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any other discussion?
I'm sorry, can you repeat, please? I didn't catch your fund balance number, Brian, please.
Fund balance, number two, increase the use of the fund balance from $820,000 to $1,120,000.
How much, I'm sorry, go ahead. Mr. Rush had it hand up.
Well, I'm going to borrow a page from Mr. Cummins' playbook, and I've got a little 2 pages, single space to read.
Okay, carry on.
At these budget hearings, the public and some council candidates have repeatedly stated how much they appreciate our police and fire departments, while in the same breath they say, don't increase my taxes. In the past 3 years, the timid council has heeded these constant cries, and as a result, the city coffers have been undernourished by about $2 million, which could have been used to build a solid fiscal foundation for this city. My first impression upon moving to Canton 6 years ago was that of a city government under stress, overburdened with debt, failing infrastructure, and no financial reserves. Primed to take a seat on this council, I, as did several of my other colleagues, attended the Citizen Police Academy sponsored by a police department. As part of that curriculum, I rode in a patrol car one evening for about 4 hours. It was an enlightening experience. The car had one working headlight, and after experiencing some public ridicule, we headed back to the station where the police officer took a headlight out of another patrol vehicle that apparently was awaiting repair and replaced the one in his vehicle. Also, that evening, I noticed police officers were talking to one another on their cell phones because the radios were unreliable. These deficiencies have long since been remedied, but many still exist. A few months ago, our police chief penned a letter to the city council explaining a need for additional weaponry because, in his opinion, the department was ill-equipped. He did get the funding. This new proposed budget also requests $280,000 for new vehicles, added personnel, and protective vests for our beloved police department. The fire department currently has 2, 3, or 4 men per vehicle when responding to a call. And Mr. Kelly explained, and Chief Floyd explained to me, that there's a general fire safety procedure that has a 2-and-2 rule, which requires that 4 men be on site before any 2 men can enter a burning building. In case of a fire, our men jeopardize their safety and violate the safety procedure when the situation requires it. Although my colleague, Mr. Cummins, has correctly stated that only 4.2% of the fire department calls this year are fire-related, I'm sure that if he were trapped in a burning building, he would not want the fire crew to wait for another truck before attempting to rescue him. I can also add that in my 6 years in my current home, we have had 2 fire-related incidents of which I am aware, because one was next door and the other one was across the street. Maybe only 4.2 or 6%, but that's close enough for me. Hiring 9 firemen would give added safety protection to our firemen, as well as guaranteeing the ISO 3 rating for which the mayor in his veto of May 16 of this year said we should pursue. This city is still under financial stress. Although we now have $300,000 in a dedicated reserve account, we should have about $1.3 million for a city our size. We still have a failing infrastructure and will soon incur additional debt to repair our water and sewer facilities. We need new fire stations to better serve the people in Town Mills, Summer Walk, and Great Sky. I personally support an increase in our millage rate to get our revenue back to where it was 4 years ago, to set this city on a sound financial footing. I also feel that the city should raise the senior trash rate to at least cover its cost. I think it's unfair for seniors who already receive a substantial tax break to expect the rest of the city residents to subsidize their trash pickup. But it seems that the mayor and some on the council and many local residents do not agree. They appear to be content with a government that is underfunded and understaffed, but still expect that government to deliver all the desired services. I will not vote to increase taxes, but I will vote, as the people have requested, to spend the unassigned fund balance to fill some of the needs of this city. By doing that, we will substantially deplete much of our resources and not add anything to our reserves. We can only increase revenues hope that we can increase revenues in the future, and our failing structure holds together and our firemen stay safe. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I don't have a 2 or 3 page. Maybe it might be best that I do, considering I've been known to ramble a little bit. This motion that Mr. Bryant's put forth will probably pass. I will vote no on it because of one thing, and you just heard it from our guest, from our speaker during the input section. As everybody knows, I'm for public safety, particularly in this issue is fire. I think that was explained very well. I'll have to say that the opposition to this has given an awful lot of information that is somewhat, I guess, for the lack of words, spin in the direction to make people feel secure in what they've got as far as fire and safety and public safety. The main reason I'm going to vote no on this is that it's going to leave our city with maybe $1 million. And a city, just like Mr. Rush just said, of this size needs at least 1.3 million. If you remember, some of us, about 4 or 5 years ago, this city, when it got into straits, they had to go to the bank to borrow money just to make payroll. Just to make payroll. I believe in taking some of the money out of the budget, of the unassigned. I am in favor of that, not at the expense of the fire people. You probably read in the Tribune today how little it's going to cost another city as far as a small increase. It's not much. And I agree with some of the other council people. I have had 0 calls saying that don't increase taxes. I've had some people at Sunday school to come up and say 17, 18%, and I agree, that's way too much. But to come up with a quarter of a mil would give us fire people, quarter of a mil. Folks, it's not a lot of money. And that would put us back in, I could vote for that. I offered that 3 weeks ago when I was at my last meeting. I was on vacation the last 2, to come up with a compromise that would include fire. And apparently that's not going to pass. But I just wanted to say why I'm going to vote no, and the reason why is because fire protection, public safety is not being considered, and the other reason is that it's going to leave our city short on financing.
Thank you. Mr. Scott?
The unassigned balance or the reserve, I'd like to address that with Mr. Rush and both Mr. Huffman. With the motion that Mr. Bryant has made, the actual unassigned balance left will be about 1.2 million, and it will only be short of what Mr. Rush suggested of 1.3 million by $100,000. So Mr. Bryant's proposal still leaves us a good unassigned balance for those unforeseen circumstances. Thank you.
Mr. Rush?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to make one point clear. we keep continually conflicting reserve with unassigned balance. We only have 330,000 in reserve. That's all we're going to have next year. We're going to have unassigned fund balance, which we've always had, which is just a float to cover what we have. The reserve is for emergencies. And the good management practices, we should have 1.3 million in a reserve account, period, not in an unassigned fund balance.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just to go along with Mr. Rush, this council has a fiduciary responsibility to do what's right financially. And in having individual phone calls with some of the council people, some of them say, I know what's right, and I always vote what's right. But I don't see that happening tonight. I'm going to vote for what's right, and that is we need to have a $250,000 increase in tax. That's not being put forth as a motion because I think it'll be turned down. If any council person would like that to be put forth in the motion, I'd be glad to do it, but we've got one on the floor right now.
Question, comments?
Question.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table.
I've got one comment.
Go ahead. You mean after the vote? Or?
No. If we call a question, we have to vote on the question.
Right.
That's correct. Vote on the question, or?
I'll enjoy it.
Just one hour. I would just like to say, I really made this motion with a heavy heart, a lot of lost sleep. We do need non-firefighters. Mr. Cowley is correct, others are correct. We do need them. We will be going into 2014 with enough money to hire them if the next council decides they want them. 3 of us are rolling off of this council. I think it's best that we leave them the money and let them make the decision whether they want to move the city forward and protect the people like we should be protected, or whether they should do it a different way. I've got a high level of confidence that the revenue collections next year will be even higher than we think they're going to be. Our estimates, as always, are conservative. So that's my explanation for backing off on hiring the firefighters right now. It still needs to be done, but I think that this is the right way to do it. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Anyone else? Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no?
No.
All members voting for the motion with exception of Mr. Huff. Okay. This will remain, the millage rate will remain at 6.8 mils.
Mayor, could we, Nathan, putting you a little bit on the spot, I hope you followed all that. Mayor would remind you and council respectfully, we've actually got 12 budgets that are going to need to be adopted. Obviously, hopefully they won't all require that level of discussion, but we do have 12 different funds that the budgets that need to be adopted. And the mayor and I discussed yesterday whether or not the right approach would be to eliminate any confusion, provide you with cleaned up copies and final adoption on the budget and finality at the first meeting in September. But it's my assumption that adoption would be with no further discussion or changes. That would simply be giving you the cleaned up copy of what you have agreed to tonight, and then you could finalize your vote at that time.
Now, I gotta say this, I was also under the assumption that we are adopting the FY 2014 budget, not just general fund budget. That's what we just adopted, was it not?
If you adopted all of them?
We adopted it all. I mean, that's what the public hearing was on, all of them.
Okay.
The budget one with the changes, whatever the last budget,
We didn't just pick out one section of the general fund and vote for that.
Okay, well, the motion, I wasn't sure that the motion included or anticipated the adoption of all of those budgets, but if that's what you're saying,
That was my
then.
understanding.
the budget.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The budget, yeah. Mr. Cummings, you had something?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I can go along with what was just said, but I think in all fairness to the stormwater board that came, I'd like to motion to modify the stormwater budget according to the proposed budget presented by the stormwater board and reduce stormwater fees collected by 35%. I feel, and the reason I make that motion, and I know I'm giving you the discussion before you, but the reason is it was presented to us and it deserves this council to make an up or down vote on that. And so I
Mr.
will.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
that's not on the agenda. We
But it's
had,
still about the budgets, you know, and if you want to make a comment about it, that's fine too. I mean, you know, we're not, I'm not going
we
to say
had, we had a
anything.
meeting at 4:30 that ran to almost
Sure did.
an hour and a half, whatever. And we said we need to have some additional information before we make a move. You were sitting there and heard that input, and now how can we then jump ahead and make a move until we get the information we asked for? So, I'm saying,
What information did you ask for? Are you talking about the
I
stormwater?
asked for information.
Well, you just adopted your budget
Yeah.
already. You should have made a move.
No, that's fine.
We're not talking about the stormwater manual here now.
No, we're talking about the budget, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I think we've already adopted the stormwater budget. The last vote did it, so
Yeah.
I don't think we can change it now anyway, unless we
Well,
rescind the last motion. Am I correct?
Don't second it. So, you know.
You could.
Well, you made a
By appropriate
motion.
motion.
Is there a
proposed.
second? Is there a second? Okay. So to accomplish basically what he's asking would require, I guess, a budget amendment, and which, you know, could be done. But, you know, anyone else? Okay? In that case, so, yes,
I need one point of clarification now, so to be sure, because it was not articulated, I don't believe Mr. Bryan's recommendation was discussed beyond Mr. Cummings' point about the pay increase situation. And let me say the reason that the police department, and you actually were part of those discussions with the police chief, so I must say I was a little bit surprised that you were taking exception to what I thought was an earlier concurrence by you, but that's everybody's prerogative. But he is down right now 8 patrol officers. 8 patrol officers. And I asked him what he was hearing from those applicants. And he said to me, I'm hearing two things. One was the starting salary, and when the Atlanta Regional Commission surveyed the city of Canton starting salaries for police officers versus 8 other local governments, we were the lowest at the starting salary level. Starting salary they're asking about, and secondly, they're asking about take-home privileges of cars. And tongue in cheek, I said, you mean they're not asking you what our millage rate is, or what our unassigned fund balance is? And the answer to that is no. But the police department is being singled out purposefully and not ironically, because it has by far the most glaring need of all of our departments.
Thank you.
I think all of our departments actually have needs there, and I do feel that we need to move very quickly to implement what the charter says, and that is that we have a pay grade system, a classification system, and that actually, once you get it implemented, it actually says in there that you can't just indiscriminately change pay grades or pay salaries. I guess you could, with the council approval, or changing the pay grade, but we need, not just for the police department, we need this for the entire city. We need it for the entire city.
Now, is the 3% across the board, is that going to be in effect? Is that to keep the, because that did not come, I want to say, that did not come from.
That's in the budget.
It's in the budget. All right, well, no, it needs to be simply reaffirmed. That was not a staff initiative, that was a council directive. And I just want to be sure that that's.
It's in the budget, so the
Okay.
budget's been approved.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Had I been aware of what Mr. Wood just brought out, and that he has absolutely zero problems with other departments, I've got no problem with bringing any employee up to comparable wages. I just thought, and given it a lot of consideration, that if we do one, it has a potential of creating a morale problem in the other. But since you have no problem with it, I'm fine with it too.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have anything?
Motion to adjourn?
Have a motion to second, those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.